Greetings, programs, and welcome to a latest edition of the Awesome Friday Movie Podcast. My name is Matthew, and I'm enjoying watching Simon laugh every time I say that, which is why I say it every time. How are you, Simon?
We should start the podcast, the upload, like 20 seconds before you say your good, whatever you say, welcome programs, because it captures the shift of inane banter to now we're going to talk in our podcast voices because we're such professionals.
We are professional. We're very professional.
I'm not going to use the adjective tired because it's too true, but I'm good. We've been in our house for 2 weeks now, and we're about to get it beautified because you and your wife are coming over. You are our first visitors. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, we're very excited.
You're gonna bring
I do enjoy
gently for us.
That on our movie podcast, our listeners have had just like an ongoing narrative of your move.
It's because it never ends.
Like, it's not a complaint. I think it makes us relatable.
Somehow it does. Somehow, all the stuff we had in a 1-bedroom den apartment has now filled a 3-story, 3-bedroom house.
Yeah.
We're already out of space. Our delivery guy, who is a giant Greek guy called George, who I'm absolutely convinced is wanted in 10 countries, looked at all our stuff and said, "You have a lot of stuff." It's like, yes, yeah, we're aware of that, George. Thank you. And he managed to fit his 4-ton truck. He fit all of our belongings into this one truck: beds, wardrobes, everything, couches, all of our boxes, all of our belongings into this one truck. And I went to unload it. And honestly, this man could win Tetris World Championships. There was not an inch of wasted space in that truck. It was beautiful. Thing of beauty.
Yeah, I mean, that's what movers do, is they Tetris stuff into trucks all day. So.
Yes. Yeah, he's very good at it. So, but yesterday, I don't know, I'm 44, and the day before yesterday, after 2 weeks of building all of the IKEA and unboxing everything and moving stuff, my back went, no, that's fine now, thank you, that's enough now, no more bending over, no more lifting. And so I went for a massage and had my back thoroughly worked out, and it felt amazing. So
well,
yay for needs of an older person.
Yay for being adults.
But I did actually have time to watch the 2 things we're going to talk about today. I'm quite excited, so I don't have to just ask you questions.
I know, it's always a better podcast when we both have opinions.
It's I always have opinions. I don't have to watch something to have opinions. Don't worry. How are you doing? How's your week been?
It's been busy. I have a sinus infection, which is fun.
Okay.
My head feels like it's going to explode. And also, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a raging pandemic going around for a respiratory illness. And that's, there's nothing to make you feel a little bit like a pariah than having respiratory symptoms while there's a respiratory pandemic happening.
Have you got to the point yet where you get onto a bus and then suddenly you need to cough, like you really need to cough? And you're trying to like hold it down and hold it down and hold it down. And
I've been there.
It's torture. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. So, but no, it's I have work and school and writing and all kinds of stuff. So I'm just quite busy.
Why don't you just send your wife over and you stay home and just do whatever you need to do, and we'll feed her and send her back to you?
Because I want to be fed too.
Okay. Fair enough. Can't argue with that. Good. Well, what are we talking about this week?
So we're going to talk about 2 new Netflix releases. One that came out last week, a Western called The Harder They Fall. And then the upcoming Netflix release, which is also in limited theatrical release right now, including for those of you who are local to us at the VIF Center. It's playing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think. And would be well worth seeing on a big screen. Tick, Tick, Boom, the movie based on the autobiographical one-man show by Jonathan Larson. Jonathan Larson, who of course went on to create Rent. This movie itself, directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who is apparently inspired to, be Lin-Manuel Miranda by watching Tick, Tick, Boom when it was just a one-man show in the 90s. And starring Andrew Garfield in what I might posit now to be maybe his best ever
Mm-hmm.
performance. He's so good in it.
He's
But
certainly in the running.
yeah. And no, Netflix is not a sponsor. These are just the movies we like this week. So that's
Yes.
yeah.
At some
And
point, it had to happen with their flood of new content we were going to have a Netflix special week.
it's true. It's true. And we still haven't seen Eternals, so we'll cover it one day.
Do you know what I really love about our friend Rob? We have a very, very good, close mutual friend, Rob, who is Netflix employed.
Hmm.
And so we follow the news. There's lots of Netflix news all the time. So we used to like text him on our shared chat, like, "Hey Rob, I've heard about this. This is," and this poor man cannot say a thing about anything. So I've just stopped like that. It must really annoy him. It's like, "Oh, I read this was happening," and sometimes you gotta, "Oh, what's your source?" And then you're like, I get the feeling occasionally that he's worried that someone pulled the button too soon, or pushed the button rather. It's like, why, how do you know that? Um, but so I've stopped talking to him about Netflix because of course he wants to be friendly, but he also can't say a damn thing about anything that goes on in Netflix. So I think we need to respect
I
that.
mean, especially since he's not employed on the production side, so
Right?
we,
Yeah,
we can't keep asking him questions about upcoming
but
productions, and he's like, "I'm a programmer, man." Like,
he keeps
yeah,
it all running smoothly.
yeah, it's true.
Anyway, so
Anyway,
yes, it is a Netflix special. Um, what's kind of nice about both of these is that you couldn't. Were they both Netflix productions? Because you can't
uh,
really.
that's a
I
good
had
question.
I had a theory when we watched or when you watched Finch about made for TV movies having a different dynamic and a different focus when it's framed and shot and edited because they know it's going to be on TV. And Finch was actually, as you told me, bought by Apple. But these two, I believe, were made by Netflix. And the nice thing about them is that they both feel like big movies. They feel like cinema movies, especially Tick Tick Boom. I'd say I would make time to go and see Tick Tick Boom on the big screen if I had the time to do that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, they're both made in partnership with pretty major production companies. The Harder They Fall was co-produced by Overbrook, which is Will Smith's production company, and Tick Tick Boom was produced by Imagine Entertainment, and that's Brian Grazer, and Ron Howard. So,
right.
they have pretty spectacular production partners on these ones. I guess just with the distribution deals made in advance, and also both of them. Um, very specifically targeting awards audiences. So they both got limited theatrical runs as well. Um,
Right.
I wish that I had had the chance to see. I wish that I had the chance to see the first one, and I wish that I would have had the chance to see the second one in the theater because it is playing again. For those of you in Vancouver, this episode will be put out on the Sunday the 14th, and it's playing. So that makes it playing today, tomorrow, the next day, and the next day at the VIF Center. And if you get a chance to go, you should
Mm-hmm.
totally go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, you should. I mean, we'll get to why. I've got a very specific reason why you should see it in the theater later, but I
yeah.
think we're going to talk about the Harder They Fall first.
Yeah, that seems like the plan. That one's had a bit of coverage already. Is a Western film by James Samuel, who's otherwise known by his stage name The Blitz when he's a singer. He's also the brother of Seal, which I didn't know until after. Um, and it's a
Cool.
Western film
I didn't know that.
starring a bunch of great actors playing a bunch of black cowboys who really existed, coming together in an Avengers style lineup where they fight a team of other black bad cowboy bad guys, and it's great. And I don't think Simon liked it, but it's great.
Uh, I think I'm not as like effusive as you like the. Why don't you give us a synopsis? What happens in this movie?
So the opening
But
scene,
wait.
yeah,
You have to use your the Harder They Fall voice.
I don't have one of those.
Well, neither did some of this cast, but that didn't stop you. You can do it. Come on, just talk
No.
real low. Okay, what
So
happens?
the opening scene of this film is a family sitting down to dinner. They have the father's a preacher. He seems quite kind, and then a cowboy shows up with a pair of badass gold pistols. You don't see his face, but he murders the preacher. He murders the preacher's wife, and he brands the son with a cross on his forehead. Fast forward to I don't know how many years later it was, but that child is now an adult, played by Jonathan Majors. He's an outlaw who is hunting down the gang of the man who killed his family. He is Nat Love, who's a fairly famous black cowboy, and he has a gang of his own, and he's looking for Rufus Buck, who is played by Idris Elba, and his entire gang to seek revenge. Um, I don't even want to say any more because like,
No,
there's not
don't
much.
need to,
First
mate.
off, you don't
No,
really need to say more.
no.
It's a pretty straightforward Western film where one gang faces off against another. Neither team of people is necessarily, the good guys. It's definitely, anti-heroes versus villains. But there's some pretty spectacular performances. There's a couple of interesting musical numbers. The soundtrack, as the kids say, slaps. And more importantly, not more importantly, but it's also just like super colorful and an obvious homage to the spaghetti western, and I loved every frame of it.
Oh. What did you love about it?
Everything I just said.
Okay, don't. Okay. Oh, everything. My
Yeah.
mistake.
No,
Matt's
I mean,
movie reviews. Yeah.
one thing that I actually really loved. So I wrote a full review of this. You can go read it on the site. There'll be a link in the show notes. But um, one thing I just really liked. I've talked about this with some people. I don't know if I've talked about it on here, but there's a real trend in film of desaturation. I think I talked about this when we talked about Dune, where they just they crank the saturation down. They choose color palettes that are like grays and browns and blacks. And this film is colorful as hell. In particular, there's one fight towards the end where Regina King and Zazie Beetz face off in a dye factory. And as they fight, there's dyes fly and like colorful fabric flying everywhere, and it's just kind of gorgeous to watch. And I really like that the film. I mean, the film's obviously a big push in terms of representation, because all the main actors and characters are black, and it's so many basically amazing black actors, but it's also just a fun story. It's a fun Western story, and I loved every frame of it.
Good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Why?
So,
So what didn't you like? Because you obviously didn't like it as much as I did.
I didn't dislike it. Like, let's start with the color. You're absolutely right. The color was really, really nice. The cast has some of my favorite actors in it. I was not aware until I started watching the credits that Zazie Beetz was in it, and I adore her as a performer. Jonathan Majors is interesting because the first time I'd seen him was at the end of Loki.
Mm-hmm.
And then, based on your recommendation and just whatever the hell he did in Loki that was so singular and good, I watched a little bit of oh god, the horror thing,
Lovecraft County.
Lovecraft County. So I watched a little bit of that, and I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting, very, very different. So this is the third time I've seen him do something, and again, completely different body language and tonal delivery, and I thought he was really, really good. And he's, as an actor, I think he's definitely, he seems to be one of these actors who is able to get that sort of full body chameleon transformation between parts. Like, if you saw between this and Loki, there is no shared qualities at all, and you're I didn't know about the character in Loki, and so from what you're saying, he's going to pop up a lot more in the future as every variation of whoever that dude was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an inspired piece of casting, if that's the case, because he's clearly a very, very, very good actor who is good at changing things on a very micro level. And it's difficult. I spent a lot of my life being an acting teacher, and so I look very, very carefully at choices and body language and things like that. And he's so precise. He's so good. and he's got so much going on without overdoing anything. And um, I feel the same way about Lakeith Stanfield as well. I think Lakeith Stanfield is one of the best actors we have in any format at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
He is
He's
again another chameleon, and I forget the first thing I saw him in, but the second thing I saw him in was oh, it's not Thank You for Smoking. It's called
sorry to bother you.
Sorry to Bother You, and I actually had to check the credits that it was the same guy, and that's
Mm-hmm.
always, you know. And then I saw him in a few other things, and he is just incredibly focused, and no difference in this. Like the cast were not bad. I'm never that convinced by Idris Elba. I'm just
Really
not. Yeah, I'm
interesting.
never that convinced by him at all. The most I've ever been convinced by him was in Suicide Squad, and everything else I see him in, I just don't believe. I don't believe it. I don't believe the character at all, and I don't know why
Interesting.
that is. But the in terms of the rest of the cast, like of course Delroy Lindo is not going to be bad, and
I mean, Delroy
I
Lindo, like walking down a street with two pistols, killing guys left and right, is probably the coolest thing you'll see all year. And it's
and
such a
yeah,
perfect callback to so many spaghetti westerns with
yeah,
just the way the whole big final battle is shot,
yeah,
uh, with just the camera angles and the way that the camera follows them around is so perfect in
yeah.
terms of a loving homage to that style of filmmaking.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Like Regina King as well. The first thing I'd seen her in was Watchmen, and I just blew me away. And she's an incredible actress too. So the cast is there. The look was there. I just felt, for me, it felt a little too much. How can I put this? Almost like a music video trying to be a western. Like it didn't feel, there were so many on the nose creative decisions, like where they go to the name, they decide to rob a bank for reasons. The bank robbers want to rob a bank. This is not a spoiler. And so they mention this one town. They need a certain amount of money, so they have to hit a bank. And they mention this one town, and someone says that's a white town, and they're like, yeah, that's why they'll have $10,000 in the bank. And so when they go to the town, it is literally a white town. Like everything is bleached, the ground, the floor, the buildings. And up until that point, we've seen towns like Redwood that have been very dusty and very red and very chalky, and sort of that brownish tinge to everything. So I think there's a line between subtlety and I kind of feel the same way about the gunfights as well. The gunfights when they're, you mentioned Delroy Lindo walking out with his twin pistols, they didn't feel, they felt maybe over, oh well, I don't know, over choreographed, over produced. It felt like a music video to me. And I think
See that? See,
the main thing I didn't like, let me finish this one thought, because the
yeah,
main thing I didn't like was the soundtrack. So the soundtrack use a lot of modern beats and a lot of modern music, and
it's very anachronistic for sure.
yeah, I truly believe I would have enjoyed it more if it had used more of a classic sort of Morricone, and it had some in there. You know, in the closing credits with the that amazing choral song in the closing credits,
Hmm.
that was amazing. And if I think that could have been the music style for the whole thing, like a bit more, because the movie's trying to be a traditional western and does a really good job of it. I don't want to hear hip hop beats and rapping over uh, uh, an entrance into a western town. I want to hear things, and when Zazie Beetz and Regina King start fighting in the dye factory, just before they get there, they walk in and they're facing off, and instead of it cutting to something a bit more dramatic to build the tension, it starts this like funky modern hip hop soundtrack, and it turns into a comedy fight. There were no, so it took away all the stakes for me. It felt like a music video.
Oh, I disagree entirely.
Oh,
I
okay.
I love this movie. I this just to give you an idea. I think I've watched like 160 odd of this year's movies so far, which is a lot, and this is one of only six that I've given a full 5 stars to. So I adored it. I thought the soundtrack really worked. I think if it had been I think if it had been leaned more the other way, I don't think it would have as unique a voice just from a filmmaking perspective. Um, I think that all of the cast are perfectly on point, and I think that the way that the music was integrated worked pretty well. Um, I think that Idris Elba was pretty good in this. I think I actually liked him better in this than I did in Suicide Squad. Not to say that I disliked him in Suicide Squad. I just liked the cool and casual malevolence he has in this compared to that, because they're both that kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that sold me on it was there's a moment where he gets to his like town after being sprung from jail, and he starts telling people they're going to have to tax them to keep them safe. And then someone speaks up, and the guy who speaks up doesn't doesn't even disagree. He just like asks questions, and Idris Elba's character just kills him on the spot and says, "Any other questions?" And we move on. I also sort of disagree on the like. It's true when they get to that town, which I can't remember the name of, but they get to that town and like the interior of the bank is stark white, which is an obvious. It's a pretty obvious choice, to be fair. But compared to most westerns that are produced today, especially like the other which are clearly sets, which I know doesn't work for everyone, but like again, they're trying to be that spaghetti western look. But the other sets were also all quite colorful, relatively speaking. Like you watch the current sort of revisionist western style, and a guy walks into a town and like it's all bare wood with bare wood signs, and like maybe the saloon has a sign and it's like etched with a uh, what am I trying to say? Like it's a charcoal sign, like it's etched in with fire. And this was like big, bright, painted buildings with painted signs, and big. The bad guy's lair is a 3-story building with huge glass windows and red trim. And comparatively speaking to most films, it's very, very colorful. Is that choice in the white town to make the whole thing white obvious? Yes. Did it take away from the movie for me? No, not at all. I
Oh,
thought it was funny.
interesting. Yeah. No, you see, that's the we're just the other side of that. Did it take away? Did it add anything to the movie for me? Did it feel like it was a clever choice? It just felt like the director going, it's a white down, so we're gonna make everything stark white. It didn't feel subtle to me at all.
Yeah.
It was a bit on the nose. But I think maybe a lot of this comes down to the genre itself, because I don't really like westerns as a genre. Until I do, I can't work out. You're gonna have to tell me the time, but the 310 to or wherever it's called,
310 to Yuma.
Yuma. I love that movie. I have no idea why I love that specific western. And there's a couple of other westerns I've watched that I really, really like. And I'm not sure if we count Back to the Future 3 as a western. I mean,
It's
maybe
obviously
we
a
do.
western.
Okay, good. Well, I like that one too. Um, and of course, Star Wars is a space western. I just don't know. I was thinking about this actually last night, um, after we'd texted each other after watching Tick Tick Boom, and I wonder if it's because on Sunday afternoons my parents often put westerns on the TV, like old, even like John Wayne westerns,
Hmm.
and I remember finding them incomprehensibly boring as a child because I
You
didn't
know
really get
the
what was going on. And I wonder if that's just stuck with me now.
maybe it could also be the worst kept secret in the world is that John Wayne is not actually a good actor. So uh yeah. Anyway, I mean it makes sense. I even said when we were talking about covering this one, you texted me after you watched it to be like, oh, that was fine, and I'm like, yeah, but you don't like westerns, so if it's fine, that's actually kind of ahead of the game for you. It's like,
I just don't get like the ones I do like. I mean, Back to the Futures, obviously there's a sci-fi element. I love the characters, so that's fine. But the Three Tones of Humor is a pretty straight western, and I have no idea why I love that film and not other westerns.
we should do a make remake episode with the original with that and its original because that's
Oh,
actually a remake too.
oh really?
Yeah, it's a remake of a pretty classic western,
I,
also called 310 to Yuma.
I don't know my westerns at all.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, thanks. Thanks for
Yeah.
not judging.
Well,
Who's
I
in the
mean,
original?
so for me, it's a pretty square 5 out of 5. What would you give it on your whatever your rating scale is?
Two, 2 out of 5. It didn't really like that. It was fine. It was just fine. And some of the I like when they fight and they go into the dye factory, I'm like, oh, that's quite a clever way of adding color, and that's, oh yeah, that's fine. And I it has many actors that I really love in it. It just felt a bit forced and a bit fake and a bit. The soundtrack didn't work for me at all. It
Hmm.
didn't feel authentic at all.
Interesting. Well, there you have it, folks. Definitely watch the
Ooh,
movies. You can decide
yes.
whose side you're on.
That's absolutely a perfect example of why you should ignore all reviews and just watch the damn thing if you're interested in it.
Yeah,
Because one of
that's
us is
accurate.
right. In your world, one of us is right. And someone else's, it's the other person.
That is correct.
So shall we go on to our second movie?
Yeah, I think we've said all we have to say. Oh, I'm going to just chime in and say, in case we didn't already say so, obviously Regina King is pretty incredible. Delroy Lindo is always cool. Interestingly, RJ Seiler, I think his name is. He's the quick draw on Jonathan Major's team in the movie. He was pretty fun to watch. Um, and Eddie Gathegi, who plays Bill Pickett, the sharpshooter Bill Pickett in this, is also pretty fun to watch. Like the cast on this is on point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, so I think you should definitely check it out.
Yep.
Yeah, good, awesome.
Do you know what? I remember one other thing I wanted to talk about with this movie. That when I
Hmm.
was watching it and when it didn't feel authentic, and then I was trying to think. So, in terms of idiosyncratic like soundtracks and classic western was with modern elements, and so I thought a lot about Tarantino. I thought about Django. I thought about the one in the cabin that I actually really like. Is that a western because it's set in those times?
You mean the Hateful
Or
Eight?
Hateful Eight. I
Yeah,
really like the Hateful Eight.
it's
I don't know
definitely a
if that
western.
counts. Okay, good. So, and I like Django as well. And I thought about Tarantino's choice of music because he sometimes mixes things up as well. But I think what Tarantino does is try to keep it a bit more classic to the style of the film rather than putting hip hop over a western. Do you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
did feel kind of Tarantino esque in parts. Definitely. I don't know if you felt the same.
I mean, it definitely felt like James Samuel trying to, take a classic style and elevate it with his own voice,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he accomplished that. Um, you know, whether it works for you or me is, I think that I think he accomplished what he set out to do.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
in terms of like the film feeling authentic, I think that it's not like I sort of have a hard time with this question because revisionist Western, the more popular style of Western today, really does strive for an authentic feel in the way the world feels and the way the world looks and the way that people act within it. But
Mm-hmm.
classic Westerns, which is what this is very much emulating, don't. Most of them
Mm-hmm.
don't feel very authentic,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have any understanding of how the Wild West actually was. So none of that bothers me, just based
Okay.
on the style this movie's trying to emulate.
Mm.
Like it
Okay.
didn't even enter my brain because it just doesn't matter for the type of story they're trying to tell for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah,
That's fair.
yeah.
Okay. That was my
Anywho,
last thought.
good. Well, let's move on. Let's move on to this movie, Tick Tick Boom, directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda,
Mm-hmm.
an adaptation of Jonathan Larson's first one-man and then later reworked into a three-person stage show, which Miranda actually starred in at one point. I think right around the same time as In the Heights, um, and starring Andrew Garfield and a number of other people. And it is also I was kind of floored by this movie, to be totally honest.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know really what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you, I talked about this one, so why don't you give us a bit of a rundown on this film? As you're the theater guy, so
Yeah.
you tell us.
So this is a theatre kid directing a movie about a theatre kid for other theatre kids. And there's lots and lots of theatre kids, like either actual theatre kids or inside all of us, there's the theatre kid somewhere. And it's about Jonathan Larson, who in the 90s, when he was just about to turn 30, was trying to achieve his dream of writing a musical, and he'd spent 8 years writing this science fiction musical, which on paper sounds like a terrible idea, and reminded me of when I tried to set the Crucible in space. And if you know anything about the Crucible, you'll realize very quickly that's a terrible idea. And luckily, I did too, just in time. But he's the basically it's the story of him. It's the story of Jonathan Larson just before his 30th birthday, or around his 30th birthday in the 1990s, with the AIDS epidemic in full swing, with all the fear that goes around that as well, and the uncertainty and the death. And he's trying to make someone hear his art. Like, he's written this musical, all but one song, and he has managed to find one guy who says yes to putting on a workshop, and his agent is not very good at getting back to him, but all he wants is people listening to his art. Like, he's definitely one of these artists, which all artists feel like, is like, if only people could just hear and see what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all this musical beauty inside you. And like, anyone like me who spent a large part of their life in the theater and writing stuff and creating things, it doesn't take much to really empathize with that like burning, that feeling of wanting someone to just hear what you can do. And he's a very extravagant kind of extrovert style speaker and performer. And the really interesting thing, because really that's the story, is it's the biopic of this guy at this point in his life. It doesn't get into his Rent days. It doesn't get into how he tragically died just before the first showing of Rent. It's really this snapshot of time where he changes as a performer, because
Mm-hmm.
things happen and he makes decisions, and they're good decisions. And again, other performers will recognize those decisions too. And the really interesting thing about this, the thing that I loved, is that it is a piece of musical theatre directed as a film. And so many films that we see these days that want to be musicals, I'm not going to name them, but if you compare modern musicals to classic musicals, something feels off, right? It doesn't feel like, why doesn't this feel like a classic musical? And the reason is they're films with songs in, with
Mm-hmm.
a bit of fancy trickery. This is a film made by someone who understands musical theatre and understands how theatre should look. This is not a film with songs in. This is a brilliantly directed and edited and composed and written movie that is a piece of theatre designed for the screen. And really, I haven't been to the theatre in years because of all of this, and just it left me kind of that my jaw was on the floor for a lot of it, because it is so. I've never seen a film that captures that electric feeling of sitting in front of a group of people creating art in front of your eyes, because films don't usually do that. You don't, in the theatre, people go to the theatre for that connection, especially musical theatre, and it's so expensive to do so. Musical theatre is so expensive, and so many people can't do it. And this is like going to a show, and the way it's told as his one man show it's so clever that I didn't realize. I didn't know anything about Tick Tick Boom. I'm not a huge fan of Rent, to be fair, and so I didn't know that much about Larson, apart from the tragedy of him creating this thing and then not seeing it to fruition. I didn't know about his earlier years. I didn't know about his space musical and how Tick Tick Boom came into existence. And the songs from this one man show are used to tell the story of how he journeys from one thing to the next. And it's so clever. It's so clever and so moving. And technically, like, Lin-Manuel Miranda, it's fair to say, has done some things I've not been a huge fan of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of expecting it to be okay. Like, good songs, but this is his first feature. He's not directed anything in film before. He's not done any kind of TV or anything. He's a theatre kid. and I was expecting it to be a little indulgent and a little flat and a little lifeless because it's so hard to get that same energy on screen. And it was none of those things. It was snappy. You wouldn't believe that this is his first shot making a movie
Mm-hmm.
because it was snappy, it was full of energy, and the structure, the musical theatre structure, was used to tell the story of a musical theatre creator, just like it would have been in the theatre. Like, blown away by it completely.
Yeah, I think that Lin-Manuel Miranda, this being his first feature, that's a hell of a thing. I think it definitely benefits from the fact that he has not only a love for Jonathan Larson. Again, he credits seeing the one-man show version of this as being the thing that inspired him to be a theater kid, basically. And I think having that level of reverence and also having performed it himself, he did a run of the revival of this show, the three-person version of it, the version that this film is based on, where he played the Jonathan character, the John character. And actually Leslie Odom from Hamilton played the other singer, the other male singer in it. Um, I think in framing the whole story around the one man show, the 3-man show being performed, the 3-man stage show is this becomes the frame for the story, and as a song comes up, the scenes that lead up to the song and then happen during the song are obviously the parts of his life that inspired that song. And I think it's a very smart choice. um, I sought out and watched a bunch of clips, as much of it as I could find, basically without totally breaking the law, of the one-man show and of the 3-man show, and like it's totally different. I think that this is a rare case where the movie is 100% better than the stage show. Um, just by the way that it mixes and matches and cuts back and forth from the stage show being performed to the actual scenes being acted out, and also the way it doesn't do that thing that I kind of hate modern musicals for, where they sing live. um, it's definitely like I'm sure they were singing on set, but I'm also 100% sure that they sang after the fact and put that dubbing over every performance because it just sounds amazing in a way that it's the Les Mis problem when they sing live, right? Like the you can get emotion, but you can't hear what the fuck they're talking about. um, and then honestly, so everything you said, plus the fact that turns out Andrew Garfield is a hell of a performer.
Oh my god!
Like
I
we already knew he was a hell of an actor. Like that's a thing that's already been well established by many of his choices and many of his performances. But apparently, he was approached a year before they even started filming, and in that year, he learned not only to sing but to play the piano. And his performance is like 100% theater energy in the most outgoing and exuberant way, and it is so wonderful to watch him perform throughout this film. And I think that, again, having gone back and watched some of the clips of some of the like monologues and songs from the stage shows, I think that they're staged better here, and I think that they're performed more sincerely here as well. Especially any of the ones that require him to emote in any way other than happy. I think he brings a real depth to the emotion of all of the songs that is not missing, but definitely not as as deep, for lack of a better word, in those versions. There's also, I found a really good clip online of so the opening song, which is called 3090, um, comparing, like, just having them side by side with Garfield with Larson, and it's amazing how close to, like, he looks and sounds like Larson. It's pretty incredible. He
Yeah.
really, really captured him in the performance. I fully expect Andrew Garfield to be up for all of the awards this year.
And the nice thing is that he will deserve every single one of them. Like sometimes something like this can be Oscar bait or Tony bait or any kind of award bait you want to talk about.
Oh,
When an actor,
wait. Rami Malek. What?
Wow, you should get that scene to you. Got a nice case of the overrated actors.
Yeah.
Um, the yeah, you're completely right. Like whenever these days, because the stupid thing is like any kind of triple threat, even double threat these days, is like, oh my god, he can sing too. This is amazing. He can dance. When film started and all the film actors were theater actors who just moved over into the Warner lots, they were all triple threats. You watch Guys and Dolls now, you look at Brando, who is singing and dancing his heart out in Guys and Dolls. Like every single actor could sing, could dance, and could act, obviously. And if you couldn't do those three things, you didn't work. So it does piss me off that whenever any kind of modern film actor dares to sing a line in anything, everyone's like fawns over them. Except in this, like he is, he's clearly not being. This is his voice. This is him singing. He got the part after Lin-Manuel Miranda saw him on Broadway and Angels in America, and now you can really see why, because he is so watchable. And in terms of his acting as well, like Larson had a very distinct body language, and I think it would have been quite hard to capture that without appearing over the top or too like effeminate at times, centered at times. Garfield just manages to nail it completely. He is completely believable. I'm sorry, I keep laughing whenever I talk about Andrew Garfield in this one because I keep saying Garfield should get the awards for this, and I love Garfield the cat, so it keeps in my mind. I keep chuckling, but Andrew Garfield is a British man. He's from Surrey. He has no business to have an accent this good. Like you can't hear. When I first found out he was English, which was after watching him on Social Network and Spider Man and lots of things, I I had to double and triple check because he is beyond solid. He made everything he does, and I was thinking about this last night. Like why did his performance work so well? It's because he just put everything up there. He was so honest in the performance. You
Hmm.
could see everything in his face. There was no pretension there at all, even though he's playing this very pretentious character with a very high opinion of himself because he was a legit genius. But he didn't play it that way. He was just so honest. And there's some very moving moments with his girlfriend that are just so true. Like he's just so good at finding that balance between lying, which is all acting, lying and telling the truth. And he was spectacular, I thought. And
Yeah.
and uh, I just want to give a shout out to Vanessa Hudgens and for Lin-Manuel Miranda, recognizing the fact that without High School Musical, particularly High School Musical 3, there would be no modern cinema musicals. And I've had that article in my drafts for about 9 years because there is no modern movie musical without High School Musical 3. Feel free to tweet me because I will tell you why in great detail. But Vanessa Hudgens, she's a musical theatre kid as well, and she is brilliant in this. She is
in
like
a in a
electric.
in a relatively small, and I don't want to say thankless, but relatively
Yeah, no,
small role as well.
completely understated. Like she is not there to be the star, and she is there. She's very much a supporting role, and yet it's one of those supporting roles that brings everything together, and she is amazing in this.
Yeah, and uh, see, wow, my brain just went away from me. See also Alexandra Shipp, who I have only really
Yeah.
seen in the X-Men films, but she plays Susan, John's girlfriend, and she is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And Robin de Jesus as best friend Michael, also wonderful. And one thing I really liked, and as I'm sure that this is the point of the stage show that I never saw as well, but like the the film really captures, I think, that sort of go for broke attitude where John gives literally everything to his creation, including his two central relationships
Mm-hmm.
and his girlfriend and his best friend. They're both pretty severely impacted by the way he decides to live his life. And it's also interesting that I think if you tried to tell this story in a 2020 context, it wouldn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely needs to be set, in 1990 or before, back when selling out was a bad thing and when being a starving artist was a thing people did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when, being forced to choose and to give things up for your art and for your creation were a thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that they're not now, but, if Jonathan Larson, if you tried to tell the story about a similar character in 2020, he would have an Instagram and a TikTok and he'd have 1 million followers, and that's how he'd get his break, right? It wouldn't just be based on his talent.
I
It'd be a
think,
whole
yeah,
other dynamic to it that would make it less impactful, to be perfectly
yeah,
honest.
yeah. It's a very different society we live in terms of getting recognized for art. Like the process is painfully different now. I mean, this movie is about suffering for your art. It wasn't easy, but it was a lot more focused. These the modern approach of like measuring clout instead of
Hmm.
measuring talent. I mean, in his workshop where he puts it on, he's nobody. But Stephen Sondheim swings by to watch what he's doing, and that in the frame of 1990 New York, that was possible because Sondheim went around and he looked for new things. But these days, it would be agents and Instagrams and followers and
Hmm.
free work samples, and
And it wouldn't it
it's
wouldn't be
a
it wouldn't be Stephen Sondheim stopped by and gave you a note. It would be Stephen
no.
Sondheim liked your video and left you a comment.
No, it'll be a YouTube influencer asking for a free ticket and they're not turning up. It would just
Yeah.
it's very, very depressing. I don't want to get into this in detail, but it's very, very depressing how little our society values art at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And artistic expression, which was once heralded and held as the measure of a society. Like the art that was created was how you viewed that society. And that's a long time ago, literally and figuratively. And this film kind of brings that home as well. But so if you're a struggling artist, what's nice about this is that I often watch films about struggling artists, and it affects me on a very deep emotional level. And this did too, but on a much more positive sense. Even though obviously it didn't end well for him. I like, by the way, on that note, I like how I thought the film would end on his death as a dramatic moment, but it actually
Mm-hmm.
ends with his life and the fact that he died a couple of days before the first performance of Rent is a sub note. Like it ends with him being alive instead of being dead, and I think that was an amazing choice. Like Lin-Manuel Miranda made some very, very good choices with this movie, both in the writing and the editing, in the framing, in the direction. Like, I'm sure you're right. He's been around film people for so long now. I'm sure he's got a selection of technical people who've made this film look and sound so good. Obviously, he had his man from Hamilton do all the music. I forget his name, but you know, the guy. I mean, the guy who did
Well,
all his Hamilton stuff.
I mean, all the songs and all the lyrics, that's all Jonathan Larson. So,
But the arrangement was the guy from Hamilton,
oh, okay.
the symphonic arrangement, and it just sounded great. And so I finished watching this and expecting to feel that kind of heavy weight of I haven't achieved my dreams, but instead it was a lightness. It was a real it was a happy ending, and I didn't think this film would give me a happy ending because in the real world he dies of this terrible undiagnosed heart condition. He was like
Brain aneurysm, actually.
mid 30s. It was a foot long tear in his aorta.
Oh, yeah.
Like how can
Yes.
how can one live with that and just not know? And it was just like lights out, mid 30s. He's done. So
Yeah,
I
35, and like the morning of the first ever performance of
yeah,
Rent.
there's a certain dramatic irony to that, isn't there? But the I don't know. I didn't know much of the story. I didn't know much about him past Rent, and I feel very lucky to have learned everything about him in this framing with this film that actually managed to feel like musical theatre, which was really, really impressive.
Hmm. I mean, again, it's like I said before, that like I think it helps that Miranda has been in and around this particular performance for his entire professional career. I think there's a great deal of reverence, and I think a great deal of want to do it justice.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, I kind of think it's a bit of a shame that everyone's talking about. A lot of the reviews that I've seen already, and a lot of the news I've seen already, is talking about how great Lin-Manuel Miranda has done with this. And I'm not trying to discount that, but the movie is supposed to be celebrating Jonathan Larson and not Lin-Manuel Miranda. And the way our news cycle works, I feel like that may be being lost a little bit.
Mm, I
Um,
guess so, but Miranda's, you can see when he paints the story of this theatre kid who's just trying to be heard by making something different, and when you see how he incorporates hip hop into his like classical theatre styles, you start seeing the parallel with Miranda's own writing style and his rhyming couplets that he's really fond of, and when he rhymes from words in the midway point of the previous line, you hear it in Larson's stuff as well, and it's really nice to see someone so inspired by this guy who's
mhm.
made his whole life through from that inspiration and has now made a film with this guy who parallels him so much. So hopefully, I mean that's the thing with Miranda as well. Like a big part of this movie is make the next thing. If people don't like what you've done, make another thing and make another thing. And so after Hamilton, that focus on Miranda is like, what on earth is he going to do next? And to be fair, he didn't go the easy route and do another straight musical. He did all kinds of things. He did films and animation and soundtracks, and it'll be very interesting to see if he does go back to musical theatre, what he goes for next. Because what is next after Hamilton?
I mean, the next thing. I mean, who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah. Oh, it's really good. It was really, really good, and I really liked everyone in it as well. I like the messages. I like the. There's a lovely moment where his agent doesn't doesn't call him back for ages, and she manages to get these producers to come see his stuff, and he keeps leaving her messages. And at one point, she just stops the veneer and takes the phone off, like speaker, and holds up to her ear, so you know that the real shit's coming. And she's like, just when he's like, what do I do now? No one wants to do my thing. And she's like, make take from someone who's been in this position, make something else. Like
Yeah,
just keep making stuff,
do the next thing.
and
That's
and
that's the
throw
life of a
yeah
writer. Do the next thing.
yeah throw it against the wall, see who looks at it, and do the next thing. And it's good advice. It's pretty inspiring actually to keep creating and not worrying about how it's received. Just keep making it.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's good. 5 stars for me.
Ooh, I haven't
You,
settled because I'm still thinking about it a lot, but it's gonna be a 4 or 5 for me as well.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I think I told you last night when I finished watching it that I stayed. I finished watching it at about right before you said you finished watching it. So that was at like one or
Yeah,
about
just
20 to
on
1.
one. Yeah.
20 to 1, and I was up until about 2:30 just rewatching songs and looking at clips from the stage shows and
It's good
rewatching
stuff.
the songs some more. What was your favorite song?
I didn't know any of these songs beforehand. I only know his Rent stuff. I didn't
No.
know Tick Tick Boom. So based on the movie, my favorite song is either the one we can't talk about, or for reasons. Don't worry, there's some nice surprises, but we
Yeah.
can't talk about them. I like 3090 very, very much. The chord changes in 3090, like the opening of that song tells you everything you need to know about Larson as a songwriter, and tells you a lot about Miranda as well, because there's some half line chord changes that are pretty special. And there's so much energy, and the split harmonies between the three vocalists and the musical background as well. Yeah, what's your favorite?
I mean, it's 3090.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I really like the second song, the one that in the movie it's presented as he comes up with it on the spot. It's called Boho Days. Um, the one where he's just singing about his apartment while they're having a party,
Oh yeah,
which is straight out of the stage show.
yeah.
But I really love that whole sequence in the movie.
That was one of my favorite bits. Sorry, you finish what you're saying. You've just reminded me of something that was I absolutely loved. Carry on.
No, that's pretty much it. I just love that song, and I keep. It's interesting. I found a recording like of the original version of it, and it excises an entire verse, but it's
Mm,
otherwise it's such a lovely moment in the film.
yeah. And the best part about that moment in the film, because you're right, they show it like he's in a party and he starts tapping the beat and then sings to all his friends and everyone's kind of into it. Everyone sings along and it's as if it's this jazz thing. But one of his friends had brought this like football jock with him who had no knowledge of musical theatre.
Oh
And
yeah,
everyone else is a musical theatre person and they stop and clap and he's just like that was awesome. he was the dude who was like, how did everyone know what to say? Like that kind of dude.
yeah,
And he is so like into it. He's so happy to be there. They don't play him as like an ignorant jock. They play him as someone who's like, oh, that was really cool. And then right at the end, when you see like in the audience all the people he's influenced him, and the jock is there like
yeah,
just clapping along. That was one of my favorite parts.
yeah. There's a real like. I mean, I think we've said almost everything we need to say because this movie's so
Yeah,
great. But there's
yeah.
definitely if you like musical theater as well, just keep your eyes open because like
Mm,
Bradley Whitford is in this. You can see Chris Sullivan in the background. You can see several people from Hamilton
mm,
just sitting in the crowd at one point.
yeah.
Um, Basically, I think not everyone, but lots of original cast members from Rent are just in the background at various times. Like there's lots of people in this.
Yeah,
If you pay attention, there's lots of people for you to recognize in the background.
yeah, sure is.
Yeah.
So yeah, watch it. And honestly, even if you don't like musical theatre, I'd be really interested what your wife thinks of this because she doesn't really like musical theatre, right?
That is correct.
So obviously, when I watch something, and you're a total theatre kid as well. I don't know how you managed to miss. You've got such a big theatre kid leaning, and you always have.
I
I don't know how you managed to miss that part of your life,
don't
but
know.
you're a theatre kid. I clearly am a theatre kid. So that obviously colours our view of something like this. I would be really interested if someone who has no interest in musical theatre watches this, because it's not like Schmigadoon. Like Schmigadoon, the Apple TV show where they fall into a classic musical, is written for people who both love and hate musicals very specifically. So it's kind of for everyone. This is clearly a love letter to musical theatre's kids about musical theatre, using musical theatre as the medium. So I'd be really interested to hear her reaction to it.
Hmm. Well, we'll sit down and watch it at some point.
Get her on the podcast. We should get your wife on the podcast.
Oh
That'd be
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Good. I think it would be actually. She's quite smart, smarter than me for sure.
She is. She is a right one.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Well, what do you have coming up in the next week? Anything impressive? Anything?
Well, I can't physically make any more IKEA furniture because I think we've bought everything that's in stock. Um, I want to watch. I've started watching What We Do in the Shadows series 3,
Mm-hmm.
which has just popped up. So I'm 2 episodes into that. Just love that show so much, and in the second episode, one of the actors has a field day because he gets to be all of the other actors, and that's all you need to know. And he also says the line, Guillermo, come on, not everyone gets to hold their great great grandfather's penis in their hands. And it's just wonderful moments like that.
There's nothing in the world that is quite as funny as Matt Berry saying the word sexual.
Matt Berry saying anything.
Yeah,
uh,
he's so
and
good.
I haven't started Cowboy Bebop yet, so I might take a look at that. And
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Cowboy Bebop next week on the podcast, so I hope
oh, are we?
so.
Okay, I
Yeah.
will watch that then. How about you? What have you got coming up?
I have seen all. I'm not allowed to talk about it, but there's a certain space cowboy show that I need to write about for next week. Um, what else? The Canadian Genre Film Festival, Blood in the Snow, is the online portion is over, but the in-person part in Toronto is happening next weekend. So you'll start to see some reviews from films from that going up on the site soon. And then I don't know. There's something else we're getting screened for. I'll be seeing if all goes to plan, I'll be seeing the new Resident Evil movie this week.
I'm actually quite jealous that I can't make that.
Yeah,
It looks terrible, but it's my jam.
it does look terrible, but I don't know. My schedule's packed, so yeah. And then I don't know. It doesn't start for a bit, but Whistler Film Festival starts in December as well. So
And the Vancouver Asian Film Festival starts soonish, doesn't it?
I think so. I haven't actually heard back from them.
No,
So
I haven't either. Fingers crossed. Oh well.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Thank you for listening. Now Matt has some messages for you.
I mean, yeah, this is the point where I say thank you for listening, and we'd like to ask you for all the things that every other podcast you've ever listened to asks for. Go to the website awesomefriday.ca and subscribe to our Patreon or our Ko-fi or our PayPal. Click on an ad. Say you love us, follow us, or give us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. We are on. Last time I checked, we're on all of them. So yeah, and we love each and every one of you.
Well, we do, and we know where you live. We have your addresses for the podcast.
We don't.
Please.
Just to be clear, we don't. We don't collect any user data.
Wink.
Yeah.
We don't. Wink.
Yeah.
Right.
No, we don't, because I definitely set it up that way purposefully. So yeah, we will see you guys in a week. Thank you for listening, and that's. I had another thought, but it left my brain. So have a good week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.